This was a really big highlight for me here in the month of January. Probably one of the best books I've read this month. Let me tell you about it. Okay, everybody, today we're talking about Africatown, written by Nick Tabor. The subtitle is America's Last Slave Ship and the Community It Created. Nick Tabor is just a freelance journalist. You know, he's had some pieces in the New York Magazine, the New Republic, the Washington Post, Oxford American, the Paris Review. So, I mean, you know, he's not terribly well known, but man, did he ever do a bang-up job of this. I was really impressed. It was published just this year, actually, just in 2023, so within the past 12 months. And it's not a huge book. I think it's 360 some pages, including the endnotes. Yeah, about 360, somewhere in there. And very accessible. His language is quite easy to follow. I really liked this book, and I'll tell you why. In fact, where you could start, in fact, I'd highly recommend you do start this way. Go on Netflix and watch a documentary called Descendant. I think it came out, well, since 2019 for sure. The Clotilda, which is the very last slave ship that ever hit the shores of the United States, was lit on fire, and everybody had to, you know, they had to dump off all of the cargo into the river, and they all swam up into what became the community of Africatown. And these people, even though at the time, like during the antebellum period, North Atlantic slave trade had been shut down officially, like legally, you couldn't smuggle any more Africans into the United States. Because what they were doing, even though slavery as an institution continued, they wanted it to be more homegrown, I guess. You know, they wanted this whole transatlantic business to be shut down, but they wanted the black diaspora to be birthing all of the labor for the plantation economy. And so people were still smuggling them in, and this was the very last boat that ever hit the shores. And I would also highly recommend, if you're really interested in this topic, such as I was, to get yourself that book. This would be great for, all of this would be great for Black History Month, actually. It's called Barracoon, which I think is Spanish for barracks. I believe it's Spanish. I could be wrong on that. And it was written by Zora Neale Hurston, but this most of the words in here came from the man depicted there, Cudjoe Lewis, who was technically not the last, but they're calling him the last black cargo, you know, because they weren't humans back then, according to law, which gives you a sense of just how emotive this story is, and his story in particular. But if you're looking for a book that is going to destroy you emotionally, that book, like, look no further, man. That's a hard one to get through. It's up there with Holocaust literature. So, but we're talking about Africatown here, and I came across sort of a new word that I wasn't totally familiar with, at least the concept I wasn't, even if I had heard this term. It's called environmental racism. So it does focus a little bit about that guy. He's sort of like the anchor to the book, the main character, right? But he was among the few that got sold into, southern plantations, generally cotton. And this community grew up inside Mobile, Alabama. And it's actually a collection of suburbs, I guess you would call them suburbs. So just look it up in Google Maps or Apple Maps. You'll see this radius all surrounded by industrial plants and so on, you know, pulp mills, paper mills, sanitation, water treatment. I think just recently they tried to allow a trucking lot in there, some sort of transportation freight company, where, you know, you don't fund the public schools, you don't fund the infrastructure, you pump all of your sewage and all of your crap, all of the industrial waste of, you know, the richer parts of a particular area, and then as a result, you know, you create this this group of people, generally of a particular racial profile, and it has actually led to an epidemic of cancer in this particular case in Africatown, it hasn't been studied because, you know, as you know, through history, documenting this sort of thing has just been so difficult when, you know, a black man's word had no value under Jim Crow. So, you know, lots of this is just passed on orally and gets lost, right? And so, but everybody within Africatown knows somebody very close to them or has even personally been affected by cancer because of all of these towns that have been around. And where this book actually touches kind of close to home for my life story is I grew up in Alberta. And of course, the oil sands were very important to us in Alberta. The entire economy was predicated on that. And the Keystone XL pipeline that that's been installed, that eventually the federal government purchased for something like $4 billion, was set to go through a whole bunch of indigenous territory and to net off right either inside Africatown on the coast or right next to it. And, you know, he argues that, Nick Tabor that is, he argues that, you know, lots of the locals, they're protesting that, you know, we appreciate that you can make an argument that it's a cleaner way to transport fuel, but that only works if you're maintaining the pipeline. And of course, they're always, the industries and the corporations are always selling this as another term that's useful and next to environmental racism is employment blackmail or job blackmail. You know, they try to make this case that, you know, we're going to help the indigenous folks. We're going to help black folks by creating a whole bunch of jobs. Well, as it turns out, the jobs are not suited to the demographic that lives in the area, the talent pool that happens to exist. And furthermore, there are old pipelines there that have experienced some spills and some great environmental catastrophes. And, you know, the corporations just, they're like, well, you know, all the more need for a new one. And it's like, no, you don't maintain the ones you have. So what's to say that, you know, after several years, once you've made your billions of dollars, that you're going to maintain this one? So it's really well argued in that way. And it just shows you the exploitive nature of extractive capitalism and you know, environmental racism and how anyone could say that there isn't something purposeful going on here, something purposefully racist. It's just beyond me. But what an incredible book. You know, if you've seen Descendant or if you're about to on Netflix, that would be a really great segue into this book because it follows that plot line, if you will. Not that this is a fiction, but it follows that storyline. And you know, you hear about this biography, which was, you know, nearly 100 years in the making before it was released. Also, a lot more details in this particular book, Africatown. It's both a review and much of an appendix, like a really detailed appendix on that particular documentary. So probably, you know, one of the best books so far of this month anyway. It's going to be hard to outdo it. It also talked a lot about what went into verifying that this was the Clotilda that they dug up just up the river, not far from Africatown. You know, lots of really interesting history in here. If you've read this, or if you want to read it, maybe you have some questions for me or some comments, I would love to interact with you below. We'll see you down there. Thanks again for stopping by. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.